They said Filipinos don't speak real English. That's what many people around the world believed for years. They mocked the accent, laughed at the expressions, and labeled the way Filipinos spoke as wrong or broken. But what if everything they thought was wrong about Filipino English was actually right all along? What if the way Filipinos speak English wasn't a mistake, but a masterpiece of adaptation, history, and intelligence? And what if one day, a Harvard professor came forward and confirmed what Filipinos had known all this time, that their English is, in fact, real, valid, and deeply meaningful? Think about it. How did a small group of islands in Southeast Asia, once colonized and suppressed, end up becoming one of the largest English-speaking nations in the world? How did a people once told they were not good enough end up training, teaching, and even correcting the English of foreigners? What makes the Filipino relationship with English so special, so unique, and so powerful that even the halls of Harvard had to take notice? The story begins over a century ago. When the Americans took control of the Philippines in 1898, they didn't just bring soldiers and flags, they brought language. The schools were built, and English became the official medium of instruction. It wasn't just a subject. It became the very tool Filipinos had to use to learn everything else: math, science, history, literature. English was power. English was progress. English was the key to being civilized in the eyes of the colonizers. But here's the twist. Filipinos didn't just copy American English. They transformed it. They mixed it with local expressions, added rhythm, melody, and warmth. It became something new, something that reflected the Filipino soul. Words weren't just pronounced, they were felt. Sentences danced with emotion. Conversations flowed like songs. And so, without anyone realizing it, a new kind of English was born: Filipino English. Yet for decades, that transformation was looked down upon. Call centers were mocked for their accents. Teachers were told they sounded funny. Online, people joked about Filipino English grammar. Have you ever experienced being corrected for saying "open the light" or "I'll go ahead"? Drop your answer in the comment section below. Have you ever been told your English wasn't good enough? But here's the thing, they were wrong. All of them. Because one day, a Harvard linguist, Professor William Labov, known for studying how people speak around the world, pointed out something extraordinary. He said that language isn't about following one single rulebook. Language evolves with its speakers. It adapts to culture, geography, and emotion. So when Filipinos say "open the light," it's not a mistake. It's a reflection of the Tagalog phrase "buksan ang law," which literally means the same thing. It's English shaped by Filipino thought, and that makes it just as real as any other form of English spoken anywhere in the world. Isn't that powerful? Imagine something the world laughed at turned out to be proof of intelligence, not ignorance. The Filipino brain had done something incredible. It blended two linguistic systems to create perfect communication. And when that Harvard professor explained this, many people around the world suddenly stopped laughing and started listening. But let's rewind for a moment. Why were Filipinos judged so harshly in the first place? Why is it that when a British person says lift instead of elevator, it's just called British English, but when a Filipino says open the light, it's called wrong? Could it be that language prejudice hides something deeper, something rooted in colonial mentality and discrimination? Think about it. The Philippines was taught that the closer you sound to an American, the smarter or more professional you are. So, generations of Filipinos spent years softening their accent, copying the rhythm of American speech, even apologizing for the way they naturally sounded. How many times have you heard someone say, "Sorry for my English," when in fact, they were already speaking perfectly well? And yet, when call centers started booming in the early 2000s, something unexpected happened. The world began to rely on Filipino English speakers. American companies trusted them with customers. Global students learned from Filipino tutors online. Suddenly, the very accent that was once mocked became a global bridge of understanding. Isn't that ironic? The same English that was once called not real became the English that kept the world connected. But here's the beautiful part. Filipinos never abandoned their roots while mastering English. Listen closely, And you'll notice something special about how Filipinos speak. There's a gentleness, a respect, a warmth that's hard to find anywhere else. When a Filipino says, "Good morning, ma'am," or "Take care always," it carries sincerity, not just grammar. When they speak English, they speak from the heart. And that's something no grammar book can ever teach. Pause for a moment and think, why do you think Filipinos speak English with so much emotion and kindness? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think. And if you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content that celebrates cultures, languages, and the truth behind what makes us who we are. Now, let's go back to that Harvard revelation. The professor explained that English is not owned by any one country. It belongs to everyone who uses it. There is American English, British English, Australian English, and yes, Filipino English. Each form tells a story about its people, their struggles, and their history. When you think of it that way, language isn't just about words, it's about identity. So every time a Filipino says something that sounds different, they're not breaking English, they're expanding it. Still, despite the truth being out there, many Filipinos continue to doubt themselves. Many parents correct their children's English using American standards. Many job interviews still value accent over substance. Why do you think that is? Why do we measure intelligence by how Western someone sounds instead of how clearly they express their thoughts? Let's talk about that in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. The truth is, the story of Filipino English is the story of resilience. Every phrase, every accent, every borrowed word tells a story of survival and pride. The Philippines turned a colonial tool into a tool of empowerment. English didn't erase Filipino identity, it amplified it. And that's what the world finally began to see, thanks to linguists, educators, and proud Filipinos who refused to be ashamed of their voices. But that Harvard professor didn't just stop there. He pointed out something even deeper. The Filipino way of speaking English actually represents the future of the language itself. You see, as the world becomes more connected, English is no longer a single, uniform language. It's becoming a collection of diverse voices, each with its own flavor and rhythm. And Filipino English, with its warmth, clarity, and adaptability, is one of the most influential varieties shaping the global landscape today. Isn't that amazing? From being mocked to being admired, from being broken to being celebrated. Filipino English is now studied in universities, used in international conferences, and embraced by millions across the world. But here's a question. What does it truly mean to own a language? If English no longer belongs only to the West, then who decides what's real? Hold that thought. Because the next part of this story reveals how that very question shook the academic world, and how one simple discovery in Harvard's linguistic department would change the way we understand English forever. When news of that Harvard research began to spread, people started asking questions. How could something so ordinary, so everyday, like the way Filipinos speak English, suddenly become a topic of global academic attention? It all started when language researchers noticed something fascinating. Filipino English speakers were consistently outperforming others in global communication tests, not because they sounded American, but because they were understood by people from many different countries. In other words, Filipino English had become one of the most neutral and universally intelligible forms of English in the world. Think about that for a moment. The very thing that people laughed at online, the accent, the expressions, the tone, was actually what made Filipino English work better in international settings. Harvard researchers described it as linguistic adaptability, the ability to shift tone, speed, and vocabulary depending on who you're speaking to. Isn't that a superpower in itself? And it makes sense, doesn't it? Filipinos grow up surrounded by multiple languages: Tagalog, Bisaya, Ilocano, Kapampangan English, and more. Switching between them becomes second nature. So when Filipinos speak English, they're not just speaking. They're translating worlds, connecting ideas, and bridging cultures. How many people do you know who can do that so effortlessly? Drop your answer below. Do you think being multilingual makes Filipinos better communicators? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. When Harvard's linguistic department released its paper, One quote stood out and caught everyone's attention. Filipino English is not a deviation, it is an evolution. Those words hit deep. For decades, many Filipinos were made to believe that their English was only a copy. But now, the truth was clear. It wasn't imitation, it was innovation. Let's pause here and think about what that means. How many people throughout history have been told that the way they speak, dress, or express themselves is wrong, only for the world to later realize it was simply different? Maybe what's different today becomes the standard tomorrow. So, when someone laughs at how you speak, ask yourself, are they hearing a mistake, or are they just not ready for something new? If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that reveal the hidden truths behind the things we take for granted. Back to the Philippines. Harvard wasn't the only one taking notice. Linguistic experts from Singapore, Australia, and even the UK began studying Filipino English as a model for global communication. They found that Filipino speakers often used expressions that, while unique, made conversations warmer and more polite. Phrases like, "Can you please repeat?" instead of "what?" or "I'll go ahead" instead of "I'll leave now" reflected deep respect, a cultural trait deeply rooted in Filipino values. Isn't that something to be proud of? While other English speakers focused on rules, Filipinos focused on relationships. They turned English into a language of care. It wasn't just about being correct, it was about being kind. And perhaps that's the most powerful truth of all. Language is not just grammar, it's humanity. When Filipinos speak English, they're not simply transferring information, they're sharing emotion. That's why global companies prefer Filipino customer service representatives. That's why international students love learning from Filipino teachers. That's why, when you hear a Filipino voice on the other end of the call, you feel calm, safe, understood. But here's the twist that shocked many academics. According to Harvard's findings, no one speaks pure English anymore, not even the English themselves. Every form of English has evolved. The British accent of the 1800s sounds completely different from today's London speech. American English was once considered incorrect by the British Empire. Yet today, American English dominates media, business, and entertainment. So, if history has shown that languages change, why are Filipinos still made to feel that their English is less real? Isn't it time we ask, who decides what's real English? Is it a dictionary? A university? Or is it the people who speak it every day, turning it into something living and breathing? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm curious to know what you believe. Now let's look at how this global shift started changing perceptions. After the Harvard paper came out, many schools in the Philippines began embracing their version of English with new pride. Teachers started reminding students that accent doesn't equal intelligence. Young Filipinos started creating online content in their natural voices, unapologetically Filipino, proudly bilingual. And guess what? The world loved it. Content creators from the Philippines started trending for their humor, clarity, and confidence. English teachers from the Philippines became some of the most sought after in Asia. And little by little, people began realizing that Filipino English wasn't just okay, it was world-class. Let's pause again and ask, what makes you proud about the way Filipinos speak English? Is it the accent? The warmth? The confidence? Comment your answer below. I want to know what makes it special for you. But there's one story that truly captured hearts worldwide. It was when that same Harvard professor visited Manila to give a lecture on global English varieties. During the Q&A, a Filipino student stood up and nervously asked, "Sir, what if our English is not correct?" The professor smiled and replied, "Your English brought you here. It's already doing its job." The audience went silent for a moment, and then everyone clapped. It was more than just an answer, it was validation. It was as if years of doubt, mockery, and insecurity finally melted away. For that student, and for millions of Filipinos watching later online, those words meant everything. Because for the first time, someone from one of the most prestigious universities in the world had said it out loud. Filipino English is real English. Now, think about how powerful that statement is. Because language isn't just about communication, it's about self-worth. Every time a Filipino apologizes for their accent, they unknowingly apologize for their identity. But now they no longer need to. English, in all its forms, is a shared human story, and the Filipino version adds warmth and depth to that story. Let me ask you this. Have you ever held back from speaking English because you were afraid of being judged? What would happen if you spoke proudly instead, if you owned your voice? Drop your answer in the comments. Maybe your story will inspire someone else. As more experts began validating Filipino English, more Filipinos began reclaiming their voice. From classrooms to corporate boardrooms, from call centers to content creators, the message became clear. The goal is not to sound like someone else. The goal is to be understood, to connect, to express. And in that, Filipinos have already succeeded. One of the Harvard researchers even joked that if English had a customer service accent, it would probably sound Filipino, clear, neutral, and friendly. That statement went viral because it spoke the truth. Filipino English is not a lesser version, it's a bridge. It connects people who otherwise couldn't communicate. And in a world that's becoming more divided, that's a rare and precious gift. So, the next time someone says, Filipinos don't speak real English, remember this. Real English isn't about sounding perfect. It's about being understood, about making people feel heard, about building bridges. And by that measure, Filipinos don't just speak real English, they speak it better than most. But here's the question that will stay with you long after this video ends. If language evolves because of people, then maybe the future of English isn't in London or New York anymore. Maybe it's right here in the Philippines. What do you think? Could the world's next standard English sound a little Filipino? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you see language, pride, and identity in a new way, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories that uncover the beauty and truth behind the way we speak. Because at the end of the day, English doesn't belong to any one nation. It belongs to those who use it to connect hearts, share stories, and change lives. And no one does that quite like the Filipino people.